Hi guys, nice to meet you. My name is Anna Binder. I'm the VP of People at MuleSoft. I'm really excited to be here. I think it's an important topic. I think we all spend a lot of time thinking about how do we create an environment and a company where all of our best employees can really make their entire careers. They don't have to go somewhere else to get a promotion or get that next opportunity. How do we create a place where they can do that at home or at the company that you're at? Not at home. That's really hard to do at some of the growth rates that we're seeing. I heard a bunch of companies listed. We're growing at 100% year over year. How do you focus on that while you are really a talent acquisition and an execution machine? So I think it's wonderful that we're stopping to take a moment to talk about this topic. They gave me some comments around why manager training is important, and I read them, and I'm going to toss them out. So I thought about it, right? Like, I run human resources for a company of 500 people in 15 countries. I've got 55 managers, half of them are new managers. I'm constantly thinking about how to train these managers. I do executive coaching at all levels. I'm constantly thinking about this. I do it on a daily basis as a business partner, as a member of the executive team. But I also manage a team of 25 people. And I think of it as one of my most important responsibilities as a leader, as a manager, as a head of HR, as leading by example. And I'll tell you, I actually think I'm a pretty good coach and I'm a pretty good trainer. I don't know how good of a manager I am, right? Like my uber arching mantra is, I will not let you suck. Come work for me, I will not let you suck. And I mean that in the nicest possible way, meaning I'm gonna inspire and coach you to be your best self. But really, like, I feel like I have so much to learn myself. So without further ado, part of my job as the moderator here is to not screw up anybody's name, to introduce the panelists, to manage Q&A. We're going to cover a bunch of topics, and then at the end, we're supposed to do Q&A, but I don't like those rules. So I really encourage you to raise your hand at any time, ask a question. I do have a favorite phrase. A good question is no more than 7 words. So I encourage you to internalize that. So without further ado, I'm going to ask the panelists to come up here and introduce themselves.
I'll start.
It's a good start. It's a good start.
I mean, my name's really hard to pronounce, but that was not it. My name is Daisha, and I'm from Pandora. I am designing learning experiences for Pandora corporate employees. What was the other question I had to answer?
What is the biggest challenge that you are facing besides new manager training?
I would say scale, growth. I think we all face that. My kind of second would be how to get people confident with a different way of corporate learning. So kind of putting corporate learning aside and doing something new and fresh is the next biggest challenge.
Nice.
Hi, everyone. My name is Bob Leto. I'm the head of HR at DataSift. DataSift is a big data platform that processes about 2 billion social media interactions per day. So we help companies find insight and meaning on all those billions of conversations happening. So we're responsible for HR, people, culture, facilities. Biggest challenge besides learning, I would say, would be onboarding, meaning getting people engaged, feeling part of the company, and productive as fast as possible.
Matt Frasca, I work at PagerDuty. PagerDuty is a company that works with IT departments, and we work with site reliability to make sure that they are operational and as efficient as possible. The biggest challenge I think that we're facing, which I think is probably going to be super common for everybody, is attracting and retaining talent. It's just such an incredibly competitive market. I was talking with a colleague this morning that it's completely fine for people to change jobs within 6 months now. And if that's the case, like how difficult and what do we need to do to get them to stay?
I'm Carolyn, Operations Manager at Mixpanel. Mixpanel is the most advanced data analytics platform for mobile and web. So our mission is to help the world learn from its data. I would say that our biggest challenge right now, it would be scaling, but not in finding people. We are scaling at such a rapid rate that our biggest challenge, I would say, is making sure we're staying true to our culture through this drastic growth change, not just in numbers, but also nationally. We're opening our first office in New York and soon to be overseas in the near future. So that would be our biggest challenge right now, I'd say.
So when I first got called about doing this panel, new manager training, I said, whoa, 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 whoa. Let's start with, how do we define what management is? How I define a manager might be different than how you define a manager. So I thought it would be good to start with a question of, really, what does it mean to be a manager at your organization? And why don't you start at the end?
Sure. So what it means to be a manager at Mixpanel is really, we're talking about it being a people manager, right? So there are people who have manager in their title who actually aren't managing people. When we're talking about managing people, you're talking about being their coach, being a leader, being a cultural ambassador of the company. You are going to be managing people's time, you're going to be managing projects, and you're really going to be the future of Mixpanel, in a nutshell.
I totally agree. I would say the exact same things. I think PagerDuty, being a manager means stepping out of the job that you love doing and now helping other people do that and coaching them and mentoring them to do the work that you love doing. And so you're still kind of in the same in the same area, but now instead of doing the work, you're coaching and managing people to actually do it with you.
Just to add on that, I would say that at DataSift, you're responsible for your team's kind of health, work health, if you will, kind of the chemistry that's involved in that team, as well as the deliverables. And we start off with people typically being team leads, where it's more of a mentor and guiding. Then going into the management, it's vast, and kind of like you were saying earlier, Anna, I think you could almost create greater levels of responsibility if someone's a manager or director or VP, but it's managing, it's listening, it's above all, it's about communication to your team, letting them know the strategy, it's time management, it's negotiations among team members, and ultimately helping them be successful.
I'm going to just pop in an extra. Do you guys deal with this issue, especially around engineering? That all the way up the ranks, that there's an expectation that there's still some code delivered, right? Like that there's some there's respect in that, right? That's wanted. And how do you balance that with this concept of, well, actually, when you manage people, your responsibility is to execute through others, not to get it done yourself. Do you guys run into that?
I think that's definitely true with engineering, but I see that with our sales teams as well. I mean, the sales managers can't help but get in there and help as well.
Yeah, I think we saw some of that.
Yeah. Never here.
Never here.
And I think, like, at Pandora, managers, they're the keepers of the culture. We really kind of trust them to evangelize the culture. And along with everything you guys said, I think that a manager needs to create the space for their people to be their best selves.
Okay, so segueing to sort of how you make the decisions around promoting. Is there a specific and defined philosophy around promoting from within? And that's sometimes, when you're going 1,000 miles an hour, it's right, you're defining your philosophy in hindsight. But I'm curious about, not only is there a sort of a agreed to or practiced philosophy, and do you guys target any balance between, sort of experienced managers and new managers? Or are there any thinking about, is there any design or method to the madness in that? Yeah, tell
No.
you.
Not yet. I think we believe that promoting from within is critical, again, for kind of keeping the culture alive, but to also balance with bringing people from the outside. When you do the same job in the same company for too long, you get a little dull. And so outside influences really sort of dial up the diversity of kind of problem solving and ideas and collaboration. So you really have to find that balance to keep career paths rich for people that are within the company, but to also add that external influence.
So it's worth noting, when we prepared for this panel, we're all at companies of different sizes, but roughly the same growth rates, right? Like between 50 and 150%. But there's companies that are larger and more established, facing many of the same challenges that we're experiencing at a smaller. That warms my heart.
Good. Yeah, we have 300 managers, 300 plus managers that we're trying to, define what their job is.
Yeah. Matt, you want to inspire us?
Sure. So, that was me. Wow. So before even asking the question, should we promote from within, I think it's really important to ask an employee, do you want to be a manager? Because, especially at the growth rate, 50 to 150%, there's lots of positions to fill. And, you have this engineer who's doing a phenomenal job. The natural inclination is to say, we're going to promote you into a management position. And that person not wanting to, upset the boat, wanting to really do their best, if they are a millennial and they are wanting to move up that ladder, they take that position and they haven't asked themselves, do I want to be a manager? And especially with engineers, going back to what you were saying, they love to code. They love to crack problems. And now we're asking them to step out of the work that they love and manage people and do all this stuff that scheduling, employee relations, performance reviews. So the first thing I would say is, have that conversation when a position is open. Don't assume that the highest level person is going to take that role. So embrace the question with your employees and have rich conversations. And then to your point earlier, having a really rich, diverse career track for people to go if they don't want to be a manager. So, there is just as far to go in this organization on an individual contributor track as there is on a management track. So that being said, promoting from within, especially when you're trying to keep a company culture strong, is always a wonderful thing to do. So you have to create an environment where not only they want to be a manager, but are there managers there that they want to be like? They want to be like this person that managed them, or be like that executive leader who coached them.
So there's a great HR phrase that I think that we all know, right? Like, people join a company and leave a manager. Keeps me up at night, often really brings this topic home. So we're going to shift the conversation a little bit away from the philosophy and to the actual practical, right? Like, what does the new manager training look like? So, Carolyn, maybe you can tell us, kick us off with, what are you doing? What are your plans?
Sure.
And specifically, how do you know you're adding value? How do you know it's successful?
Sure.
And how quickly and how can we copy what you're doing?
Well, I don't know about all that, but so Mixpanel is in a very, we're looking at this very holistically. So we're actually in the process of rolling out our first performance review, official. And within this process, we're looking at everything from salary to training to career paths, so architecture, really defining what it means to be a manager and saying it's okay if you don't want to be a manager. There is this other route available to you. And at the same time saying, okay, we need to step back and we need to actually train these people. How do we do this? This seems impossible. At a company that was 35 people in the beginning of last year, starting this year right now in February, we are 145, to really pause and take stock and say, okay, we need to train people on a deeper level. So our manager training used to only be having a meeting with our CEO, and 3 times,
You're trained.
3 meetings. I'm looking to my director of operations. There's 3 meetings, right? So these are invaluable meetings, which I will not share our trade secrets, but now we're really, really expanding upon that. And we're using Udemy as a supplemental tool for this. So Udemy has this amazing new manager training portal, within their portal, I should say, that will always be available to Mixpanel employees. And myself and another member of our team is really looking at these trainings and figuring out which ones we want to require for new managers, which ones we want to make optional, but they will always be available. At the same time, we have to create our own internal training, things that are Mixpanel specific. Nothing will ever take the place of having a face-to-face training. Whether or not we have to bring someone in to do that and really teach us, or us build it ourselves, is yet to be seen. We are totally, creating the path that we're on. We're not following anything. We are building it as we go. So it's really a holistic approach. How do we know we add value? If our team members are happy, if they're engaged, if they're motivated. I mean, you're getting back to your core HR concepts here. Our managers are, so our HR is like taking care of the entire company as a whole and making sure we're doing things correctly, and our managers are taking care of our individual team members, right? So that would be how we're gauging.
Great. Daisha, you want to add to that?
We are, kind of feels a little bit like building the plane as we're flying.
Yeah.
And tackling the challenge of having grown so big that we can't do the face-to-face anymore. Like there's a moment in time where you have to say, wait a minute, it's just not scalable to put 300 people through an 8-hour class. So we are tackling, how do you create internally, how do you create custom, brand appropriate, bite-sized training that we can deliver to people anytime that really fits into their day, but is still like captures the essence of the culture and the face-to-face, and sort of measuring that through the attrition or the regretted attrition. So when that starts to drop down, I think that we know that we're beginning to raise our managers up a little bit. But it's a hard point in time when you say, we're just too big to do face-to-face, and now what do we do?
Right.
And that's...
Sorry, I would also just add that we're toying with the idea of internal NPS, right? So of really utilizing that as a tool to gauge our value, or the value that our new manager training is bringing, and how that plays in to employee satisfaction as a whole.
Do any of you guys use external online learning tools?
Yes. Yeah. You use Udemy, don't you?
Yeah.
Yeah. You have. I think you have to be able to supplement, because you can't build it all yourself. So I think external resources also add to the diversity of the experience that people get to have as well.
I think also, before you can ask what tool do you want to use, you have to ask what do we need to train. Like, because management training, I was thinking, like, I'm so excited to come here tonight because I want to hear what everybody's doing, because, right, I want the big Band-Aid solution. And the truth is, right, if I could find that, just we wait. They've all got the answers, I know they do. But the truth is, there's so many different things that people need in terms of management training. Do they need, like, the nuts and bolts? Like, how do I fill out a time card, or how do I approve an expense report? But then there are, Bob was saying earlier, the communication piece is like the biggest, most difficult, hairiest monster that is out there. How do you deliver a really difficult conversation? How do you tell someone that's been here for 4 years that they're not getting a raise? So those are all parts of the conversation which only we know. So I was like, we haven't done anything yet, because we're literally in that stage of assessing what do we need to do. We do have access to CEB, which has a tremendous amount of coaching and online courses. But the truth is, to just throw that out there right now for our folks would be like, here's a big pile of hay, go find the straw that's going to solve your problems for you. So I think asking the questions of what does management training mean for us is a really important one to ask first.
Great. I want to remind everyone that you guys are more interesting than we are. And so we welcome questions. It's not an engineering crowd. Nobody's shy. Okay, so let's talk about this shift. Again, one of these things that keeps me up at night for myself personally. The shift, as somebody who's your star, one of your star performers, makes that shift into being a manager and needs to make that trade-off of, oh, this work that I love to do, right? And I'm going to move away from it, and really my job, my core job has changed, and the things that I'm amazing at, I should do less of, right? Those things are my comfort blanket in many ways. How, speaking of sort of tough, honest conversations, how are you guys, and I'd love to get really, really specific on this so that it feels actionable, but how are you guys handling that, sort of brutal conversation and that honest conversation that sends somebody home to sort of look into their heart around what, do I really want to make this change? Matt.
So specifically, when we talk about that, I call it the white space. I think I heard that in a training once. There's the white space, and as you move up in your career in management, your white space gets bigger and bigger, and your list of duties and responsibilities gets smaller and smaller, because as an individual contributor, your job is a whole list of duties, whereas a manager, you're kind of doing all this other stuff. So the first thing is, like Bob was saying this earlier, having good time management abilities is one tool. So giving people the training to just, first of all, how do you calendar your day, is really important for a manager. Like tips like spend the first 2 hours of your day or the first hour of your day just planning what you're going to be able to do. That's such a great tool. It's also giving how to run an effective meeting, so that because managers are pulled in so many different directions, how about giving them a tool that allows them to actually run a meeting that's really effective, not just meetings, but one-on-one sessions. So, how many times do we go to a one-on-one and it's all about, here's everything I've worked on for the week, here's, kind of the challenges I'm running into. How about talking about what do you want to learn? What do you want to do? Second thing that I would say about kind of specific tools is giving managers the training and telling them and giving them the experience of focusing on what their people do really well. In a performance review, if all of your project plans are based around the challenges or the weaknesses of an employee, you're going to end up at the end of the year with a whole bunch of mediocre work. But if you find out what your people are really good at for a new manager, hey, what are your people really good at? What do they do really well and what do they love to do? And then capitalize on that and then fill in the spaces thereafter is a lot easier than trying to bridge all of these weaknesses with mediocre work. So that would be the kind of place that I would start.
So my question is, do you each do one-on-ones, or is that a part of your culture? And if so, how do you describe an effective one-on-one?
That's a good question. Shall I start?
I'm the moderator, you guys.
Yes, we do one-on-ones. I do one-on-ones. We encourage that with people. I think that to do an effective one-on-one, first of all, you have to understand really have to have a rapport with your folks, right? And managers have to have a rapport with their folks. So there's nothing wrong with encouraging people, start your one-on-one and go get coffee. Go sit on the roof and get lunch together and start off by really getting to know each other. The second thing about, sort of these are preliminary to the one-on-one, how do you like to communicate? As a manager, what's the best way for me to get information from you, and what's the best way for me to get information to you? Do you like hip chat and Skype, or do you want me to stop by and come face-to-face and ask you a question? So I think that those are the more important questions. Then you can structure it any way you want. I'm always a big fan of finding out what challenges or roadblocks exist for employees, especially in a growing company, because those change week to week. So being able to help them navigate those changes, I think, is really important.
Yeah, so I would just add, Mixpanel, one-on-ones are a very big part of our culture. We actually really like each other at Mixpanel. So a lot of the time in our one-on-ones, we're shooting the shit. But this is the time, it's very, very important for a manager. This is the time where it's the employee's turn to talk. It's the employee's meeting, right? So I'm actually creating a bunch of training on an effective one-on-one. It's super, super important. And I would say that break it down to its core, you have to be able to meet a person where he or she is. And that's just like the basic part of communicating. So if I'm really in your face, like I'm a New Yorker, I'm like really gritty, like I curse a lot. If I need to be speaking to someone who's a little bit more timid, I'm going to like lower my voice. I'm going to meet that person where he or she is. I'm not going to be like, yo, and go into like my, I'm not going to curse on this stage. So, you know, it's something as basic as that. And really opening the floor to the employee, having, and taking notes after. Like, one-on-ones are what continues performance reviews year-round. It's what turns a one-time event into a 365-day event. The one-on-ones keep the ball rolling, right? So taking notes, feedback, being a sounding board for your employees. Sometimes people just need to vent, and when they can't come to HR, they're gonna hopefully be able to come to their manager, because that means that they trust you, they want to talk to you, and it's a really good sign when they are able to talk about the gross stuff.
Right?
Not coming
Exactly.
from HR.
Yeah.
Ashley, I think that your question was around how to train, not just the content. So I just want to address that. One of the things I've done in my past is made it kind of a mock video, of a terrible one-on-one, right? Like that addresses, here are the 10 things you should not do, right? You should not come late. You should not forget the action items from the previous. You should not start the meeting with 3 minutes or 5 minutes about how great your weekend was, right? So I think that's one way to consume content that really makes the point. Like, right, like a one-on-one is pretty basic, right? Like this is something that we expect of our managers. So that's one way to do it.
Can I add 2 points?
Yeah, please.
Two things that might seem contradictory, but one, I always like to do, and I train or suggest that managers do this. I always ask one, kind of leading question of just kind of a pulse question, if you will. How's it going, right? And that's a consistent question every time I do it, right? Because if I've heard 6 times in a row, yeah, I'm fine, and then all of a sudden it's like, Ashley's like, then you got somewhere to go, right? And then the second part is, don't make it about just status updates. It's like, how can I, as your manager, how can I help you be more successful? How can I remove some friction? Make it meaningful and impactful, not just, you use Google Docs or something else, some other method to like get the status updates.
Great. Great question. You're going to answer that, right?
Well, I mean, yeah, I think it kind of goes back to that constant feedback, right? And not only constant conversation and feedback, but notating that feedback, right? So, we can have a conversation. I can suggest things to you. I'm not in control whether you hear whether I'm suggesting or not. So I think you need to have, a frequent feedback mechanism so that gets kind of notated.
Okay, so
And maybe it's just kind of could go back to your values, or if you have some sort of architecture about what it is to be at a different level in your company as well.
Well, so your answer is about modeling behavior, right? Like if you take that one-on-one on a weekly basis or whatever your cadence is, giving that direct feedback of like, actually, you need some help in this area, and we're going to work on it together.
I was going to ask a clarifying question of whether or not you're talking about training, like in general, like I want to increase, my skill set in X, Y, or Z, or management specific.
Example, you got a great engineer, he's developing in C++, and
Yeah.
guess what? He wants to do some, back-end stuff.
Yeah.
But he's good at C++. And as a manager, you need him
Sure.
to continue on his way. So
Yeah, I would say go to Udemy, because we're investing in your continued learning all the time, and you can do it on the Muni. You can do whatever you want. I mean, seriously, it's like we will require you what we require of you, and there's this amazing tool here that is free for you, and you can always learn.
I her to say this, by the way.
Yeah, no, I'm serious. I'm being dead serious.
Okay, so we're going to move the conversation to talking about younger people. I didn't say young people, younger. So there's a study, Employee Engagement Trends Report, produced that said that professional and growth and career development was the #1 driver of happy engagement and retention among the millennials, the younger people. So how, I think we're all facing this, right, in some way, shape, or form. So one, how do you balance that reality, right? Like those aspirations and those motivating factors with both the realities of the business and the opportunities and that you have, and also the needs and desires and work habits of the less younger parts of your population.
Sure.
Bob? You know, boy, a millennial question. You know, at first when I thought, oh, damn it, not another millennial question, right? It's all about millennials. It's all about millennials. But you know what? Millennials are a good thing. You know, 10 years ago, 8 years ago, whatever it was, when I started hearing about helicopter parents and, you know, all these high demands of this millennial workforce, I was like, oh, I don't need this. But you know what? I think millennials have opened up a lot of doors. And I think a lot of the stereotypics of what the millennial workforce is looking for, I think it's really true for someone like me who's a Gen X. You know, I think like the 3 things that kind of stand out for me are, you know, the career progression. I mean, that's kind of what this is all about, right? It's like fast track. But you know what? Who doesn't want that? I feel like maybe millennials have been a little bit more vocal about it, but I think the other generations, if you will, have kind of benefited from that.
Yeah.
And I don't see, you know, a 40-something-year-old kind of sitting back necessarily. If there's an opportunity for a 20 or a 30-year-old, you know, they probably want to take that as well. I mean, there's work-life balance things, right? That always comes in. But the career progression, I think, is huge. I think one of the biggest things that, you know, some of us talked about culture. It's like, you know, meaning, purpose in one's work. That's huge, right? And I think all of us are kind of trying to distinguish that and kind of like the stories that we talk about in our talent acquisition, right? It's all about what does it mean to work at company X versus company Y. I think that's huge.
Great.
So, me?
Yeah, I think you're up. Definitely.
I tend to really like try and get to the root of something in order to like solve it's like the ex-lawyer in me, to like really try and solve the issue. I don't think this is like an actual issue. I think it's in managing expectation for me would be simplifying it to its core. Being open and honest from the get-go as a company, so recruiters, being able to manage that expectation, being the gatekeepers, to your manager, all the way up to leadership, your CEO. You know, millennials stereotypically feel very entitled, and that they expect, okay, I'm fresh out of college and I'm going to be a manager, or like I'm going to make 6 figures and do X, Y, or Z. And it's okay to want those things, and I think it goes back to, you know, they're not the first to want them. They might be the first to vocalize it as loudly as they're doing it. But really managing that expectation from day one is going to make for a much smoother ride, and decrease the negative attrition, and increase happiness, engagement, motivation, and culture. At the end of the day, they're going to be happy and they're going to make the company a better place.
The expectation is right on, and kind of getting back to communication too. You know, I mean, this is so simple and yet so hard. Sometimes you need to say no, you know, and especially a new manager, it's really hard to say no, right? But you're doing a disservice if it's not in your culture, or even if you're going on explosive growth. If someone has an unrealistic expectation, you know, that's where we can really add value as HR. And like give our managers the tools, and everyone really the tools, to kind of say, you know what, appreciate that passion, but we need to kind of throttle back your expectations here a bit.
And I think you kind of have to keep a pulse. It's important to keep a pulse of what your recruiters are promising, right? I'm sure there's a lot of recruiters in the room, and like you want to promise a candidate the world and be like, this is the best place in the whole world, and we're going to give you everything, and like we're better than, you know, the Google of the day or the Facebook of the day or whatever it is, the soup du jour, right? Well, you're going to have to make sure that we can deliver on these promises, or people are not going to be happy, and it's going to be bad for everyone. So really, really taking stock and managing the message we're sending.
I think work-life balance looks different for everybody, because we all have different lives. I think that when you define it, you have to allow people to do work when they are best at it. So a company culture that doesn't have people clocking in at 8 a.m. and out by 5, or where you can work flexible work hours, where employees can sort of find that balance. And as long as people are doing great work, they're delivering on promises, they're upholding the culture, the balance is there. I think it's when folks are unhappy with what they're doing, they don't like the projects that they're doing, or they're struggling with a relationship within the work or in life outside of work. I think that starts to impact that balance. But to really focus on keeping people happy and engaged, and then letting them find the best place to do their best work.
Is this a hot topic at any of your other companies?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to be honest, like startups are not the best at work-life balance. Like, you're going to call a spade a spade. Everyone is going to be grinding because we want to succeed and we want to make a name for ourselves. I think that it's important to remind your employees that it's important. I have fallen prey to this myself, where I have to like make my manager remind me. I just had a conversation with her this week about it. Like, I am a workaholic and I need to check myself. Like, I need to check myself, and my manager is keeping me in check, and it's a process. But this is kind of an aside. It's interesting. We had our CRO came in July from another company, and very, very successful and very different in terms of the work-life balance component. And he's very drastically changed the sales side of our organization in that way. You used to see salespeople there, you know, till like 8, 9 o'clock at night. It's a very rare occasion right now. We do serve dinner, so there are people there, I mean, anyway, but we're talking about like doing actual work. So it really starts from the leadership and trickles down. The leaders set the tone, and he's really come in and changed that aspect of it. And actually, he told me, like, in his first few months at Mixpanel, he would yell at people, like, go home. Just go home. Be with your family. You don't need to do this right now. Sometimes we need a little bit of that.
And if you manage people and you're sending the email on the weekend and you're sending the email at 9 o'clock, you are creating that behavior.
Sending the message.
Yeah, and so one of the things that I consciously did when I joined Pandora 6 months ago is I zip it. After 5 p.m., just shut up. Don't click send. Put it in a draft. And give your people the work-life balance by modeling that behavior yourself. So I hold emails into a draft box and then send them all Monday morning. Yeah, I'm that person.
So we're gonna wrap up with one final sort of roundabout with one comment. This will give everybody the opportunity to craft their questions. I think we all wanted to come and sort of borrow from each other. So I'd love to hear from the panel, from all the panelists. What is your one idea that you think is the most creative or the most innovative, or small, medium, or large? What is it that you'd like to share with us that you think is awesome?
I'm not going first.
Okay, Bob, you're going first.
When you first asked this question, I'm thinking some really out of there, send everyone to Montana and go in a sweat lodge or something and come out amazing leaders. But I haven't done that, so I don't know if that's going to work or not. We're in the heart of San Francisco and Soma. I think there's some amazing HR tech out there that can really help us do the HR basics really easy, both for us as HR and as that we can give to our managers as tools, right? Because it's about our managers. So, right now, I'm piloting one kind of new product right now that, it's all about a cool little mobile app that, ties in how energized, it's kind of pulse about what your energy level is. And again, I think like as a new manager, maybe that's not a trait or a skill that new managers have yet to kind of know the pulse of their team. But it also, again, you can kind of just quickly with a couple, 30 seconds worth of questions, how are my activities today aligned with the department goals or the company goals? So take advantage of some of the cool HR tech out there. Embrace, share these with your managers and help them make their jobs easier.
Great. How about you, Matt?
So this is a trick that I learned at my last company, which is find the managers in your company that are really good and market the shit out of them. I swore for you. I cut this word. So we used to do a training at my last company, which was a management training. At the end of the first day, we would invite 3 of the leaders in the organization who demonstrated really strong management abilities. And we actually just brought them down and we did a happy hour where we sat in a circle, and those 3 would just popcorn answer questions from this group about management. And it was, they were difficult questions. Questions like, how do you motivate people in a company that is attriting 30%? Like, what are you doing? And they were hearing it not from the HR person telling them what to say, but from a manager that was doing it. And so, and again, it goes back to what are people good at? Well, there are probably some really good managers in each organization. Find them and share it, like share that knowledge. So it's not a tool, it's not a trick, but it's a really useful practice to get to know, the people that are really good at it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that we do that with the CRO that I was talking about. The press called him a unicorn hire, and we just call him our unicorn. He has unicorn slippers at his desk. We use Hoopla on our sales side of the org, and there's this little unicorn. We really are playing off it because he's really just done wonders for us, and he's an amazing manager. In terms of let's not copy your answer. None of you have signed non-disclosures, so that's a lawyer joke. A lot of what we're doing is kind of in beta right now, but it's not that innovative to really get back to the core of investing in your employees. It's so simple. The return on investment is going to be tenfold when you find that right tool, leveraging technology. We're in an amazing time right now in HR. We have employee engagement tools. We have employee recognition tools. We have, internal, external NPS tools. We have all these things that are at our disposal. Find what works for your company. Every company is different. There's not a Band-Aid. There's not a one-size-fits-all. So find what works and don't be afraid to take that risk. You need leadership buy-in, of course, and you need to be able to prove that there's going to be a return on investment, but don't be afraid to do it and really fight and advocate for your employees.
I'm swimming in training design this week right now. So the idea of taking risks is something that we're really embracing at Pandora. Being courageous and doing things unexpected, creating a viral buzz out of our training. We have a character, an animal in our training that just appears, and we've put posters around about this, what do you know about this animal? And people are emailing us. What's with the piranhas? What does it mean? Take the training and find out. So there's this pithy, cheeky sort of approach that we're taking a risk with because it's not traditional corporate speak. And we're trying to get messages through in like very short periods of time. And take a risk and then learn what worked and then do that again and keep building on that sort of courage of, and challenge yourself to innovate differently. Yeah. So I think that's sort of the space that we're playing in right now.
I think that's really important. I think that it's really important. We're an iterative company. We iterate in product. The second thing, we always want to improve, and we're always trying to get better. And that started with our product and is really filtered into everything else. So don't be afraid to make mistakes. You learn from them. That's when you learn the most. And you will find a way to make it better. And it's really, yeah.
So this is our opportunity to allow you to shine. Yeah, look at all these shining people right here.
I had a question about culture. You guys all mentioned managers as being ambassadors of culture, but I didn't really hear that come up in conversations about training. So do you guys do specific things that help instill company culture in your managers and help teach them how to authentically pass it on?
So I'm going to just repeat the question. The question was about culture and having your managers be these ambassadors of your culture, and how are you translating that into some of your training?
I think culture has to be woven into the training that you do. We haven't adopted sort of a culture training, like a culture class. At Pandora, there's a tone and tempo that we use. There's sort of, the way that we talk to each other. And our training reflects the tone and tempo of how we interact with each other. So I think for us, we're weaving the culture through the experiences that we're creating versus doing kind of a culture training.
Sure.
If that makes sense.
So I would say at MuleSoft, we really have a strong philosophy of promoting from within, and we like to sort of target the 50% of our managers have been promoted from within. And in order for us to take a risk on someone and really invest in them, they have to already be such huge ambassadors of the culture. That's just, it's table stakes. So it's not something we focus very much on training. It's just a prerequisite.
I'll say something that's going to be controversial. You can't train culture. There's no training for it. Our recruiting team does such a phenomenal job with the interview process that they've built, that it's just bred into the interviews, so that when that candidate goes to review, if there's any question about that person not being a good culture fit, they don't make it through the door. Makes it difficult in a time when we're competing for talent, but someone said it earlier, and one of the things that I love about PagerDuty, people like each other and they get along and they enjoy working together. And I've been at companies where that wasn't the case. So it might be controversial, but you really can't train culture. You live it, and your leadership creates a vision and a mission, perhaps, guiding principles. And you can certainly train on all of those things, but it's in the way that two people converse in the lunchroom. That's culture. It's in the way that you share at your all-hands meeting about what your newest product demo is going to be. That's culture.
Yeah, that's almost exactly what I was going to say. If your recruiters are doing their job properly, that's not something that you will ever really have to train. And is in the team building events and really fostering this idea. At Mixpanel, everyone involved in the interview process from start to finish can block a hire, no matter what position this person has. Because if you can't get along with someone, get along, right? So like if someone doesn't believe that you're a culture fit, they're not gonna wanna work with you, and that person won't be at Mixpanel. We have a very rigorous, it's hard to get into our company. And that's because that is the hardest part, right? So they can have on our scoring rubrics like 5s on like everything else. That's like our highest score. Skill, everything, whatever. Culture fit, if that's not high, no, that's it. And like I don't want to work with this person. One person says that, and it's okay. It's on to the next. So like having that process really solidified. And then, in our onboarding training, our director of operations has a culture meeting just to go over what's important to us and on a very high level overview. That's not management training. The managers already know. They've already bought into our culture. They're already a part of our culture.
Other questions? Yeah.
Oh, here it is. You were talking about that your company's in the midst of just kind of doing an assessment of things. And I'm just wondering what you all have to say about how you're going about doing needs assessments, skills assessments. I'm kind of in the midst of that.
I will let you know in about 3 months. Absolutely.
Anyone else?
Well, we might be just slightly ahead, but right now it's really HR going through all the different departments and kind of taking, I was going to say best of class, but really best of department of what's working here and being that catalyst to kind of share and pilot in other departments and see if this only worked in engineering or does it work as well, equally well in client services as well.
I imagine this is something that Pandora is a little bit better at. Well, and just
we're
this
getting there.
is a scale item, right?
We focus groups. I don't really like the name, but I love what they can be. And we are hosting sort of open focus groups. Come sit down and talk to us, and we pick a topic to get some feedback and get a pulse on sort of how are people feeling, what are some of the things that they're challenged with, and then beginning to create needs assessments out of those focus groups. So it's a great place to start. You've got to get out and talk to your people. You can't make those decisions sort of in your office or your cube. Get out and talk to them, and don't be afraid to mix that up. My old habit was take best in class and let's see what they need. But I want the person who's really struggling too. I want the person who's 1 foot out the door. I want to learn what it would take to keep them.
And I won't take the easy way out and give the cheeky answer. One of the things I would say too is look at what the low-hanging fruit is. Look at your basic processes, like the performance. We are also just launched our performance review process. Out of that process, out of those conversations, there's going to come some nuggets. Like, are the managers equipped to have compensation questions? We're about to give them access to salary bands for their employees. How does a new manager handle that? So there will be low-hanging fruit. So I think that you start there. If you have 2 people in HR without a full team, and you start there and then you build from there.
So it sounds like all of you are just doing it like person to person. Sorry, but it sounds like nobody's using fancy technology things to do it or programs or you're just doing it person to person.
Yeah, I've come from a company that used a lot of fancy technology, and they stopped talking to their people.
Yep.
And I think I love data. Oh,
Yeah.
but without a story, it's just data. So don't use, if you have tools and such that you can use them, but please still talk to your people.
Oh, good.
It's so key to have that story.
Interesting. Okay, thanks.
I'm wondering if anyone on the panel feels like, particularly around career development, we're relying too heavily on managers and what you're doing to empower employees or help them build broader networks.
That's what we're doing here.
Yeah. The company I was at before really had that mantra of, you need to be the own captain of your ship. And HR and learning and development and your manager are there to support you, but this is really about you and where do you want to go. And they even, you've seen it before, but it's not about just career paths, but maybe it's a lattice, right? And it's just, what are the skills, what are the experiences that you want to have? And to your point about keeping people within your organization and not giving them the opportunities, the career growth that they don't have to go across the street to get that, they can get that within your company.
Yep. And I would also just add on that, making sure you're transparent in what is available and the career paths within your company, and then leave it up to the employee. The manager is very important in being a coach and making sure you're on the right career path and being an advocate for you going upwards in the organization. But really, I would agree, it's up to the employee.
Hi. I'm wondering about how you guys, especially those of you who haven't implemented formal performance reviews or just recently implementing them, how often you evaluate compensation. How do you make sure you're staying competitive in the marketplace without allowing employees to sort of ad hoc always be like, hey, I want a raise. So if you could talk to that.
That was my entire past 3 months. Literally, we've just spent the last 3 months doing this. So I mean, there are a lot of ways to do it, and a lot of the big answer to that question is around what your resources are. So we went through a very formal process where we built a full compensation structure matrix where we have assigned job values across the organization. Based on a company philosophy, because you need to have a philosophy around why you're paying a certain rate. Are you going to pay tech at a certain percentile and non-tech at a different percentile? Are you going to pay them at the same? If so, what are those percentiles going to be? And then it's a matter of building that and then maintaining it going forward. So again, there's a really vague answer. Specifically, I can tell you we're using Radford for ongoing compensation structure. We've got a structure in place with a philosophy around why those job values are where they're at. Every new job that opens that is not in the matrix, this is where when you have a small team, that's me going in to Radford and doing a full analysis of a job. And sometimes that can be very difficult. Like I was assessing a position which was technically like an HR operations manager. Well, that doesn't exist in Radford. So as an HR person, you have to go in and say, okay, it's like 20% of the HRIS manager and then 30% of this HR manager. And then you figure it out. But as long as you're applying the same methodology to it, and creating consistency around your compensation practices, and then you can speak to that to employees because they will ask. They will ask you, where did this number come from? And how do I know this is competitive in the market? And so, we can answer that question, but then also training managers to then answer that question for their teams. Because managers have to be bought into that process and philosophy, I think, more than we do.
For one more question. How about right back here?
Thank you. So I'm wondering, at what level do you bring in the CEO, the CTO for buy-in on some of these people ops, HR functions? Our CEO is 25, 26 years old, and their work-life balance looks really different than our finance teams and our engineers, and we're working on maybe how to educate our leadership to help be examples of this stuff. So I'm curious how you work with your leadership.
Our CEO is around the same age, maybe a year older, maybe not. This is such an interesting question. Getting buy-in early on for my specific experience has been key. Otherwise, you churn out work and it goes nowhere. And it's like when you're bootstrapped for resources, I don't really have the time to put into projects that I know doesn't have the opportunity to have buy-in. We're in a startup, we're very fast-paced, we're scaling the operations team, and I'm only one person. Katie, who's in the audience, is only one person. So really knowing whether or not there's a chance for us to have buy-in from the get-go is super, super important. But without leadership buy-in, everything will fail. If you do not have leadership buy-in, it will not be successful. And it being A to Z, it doesn't matter what it is. Because you have to walk the walk, you have to talk the talk, and it has to come from leadership. And then I could be talking till I'm blue in the face every single day about an initiative. That could be my job at Mixpanel is talk about this initiative. And if I don't have leadership buy-in, it doesn't matter. I'll get fired.
I think that's really important. And I think I was joking to someone about it. It's I learned in the last year that the annual review, I've gone through 2 annual reviews at DataSift now and kind of evolved it, this year versus last year. But the word review is kind of a bad word. You might as well just be swearing really bad in front of my CEO. So we've adopted retrospective, which is what the Scrum engineers use. So it's just, it's the same thing, but it's the words that you use, right? And you just got to know you got to know the executives that you support. I mean, I have a sales and marketing people that came from huge organizations, and that was not an issue. Like they bought in, they understand that value, right? But if you have a CEO who's, regardless of age, whether they haven't, they're an entrepreneur, they've only been a small business, and you're helping them get to that bigger business, and they don't have that framework, you need to help get them through, show the value, and probably more than anything, I think what you're trying to say is you kind of need to speak in their language, not our HR language.
Yep. Or find someone who knows how to speak their language.
Right.
And
translator.
So I want to thank Safia for making this all happen. I want to thank the fellow panelists and lots of the great questions, really thoughtful, inspiring work that's going to continue to keep me up at night. Shameless plug, I'm hiring for HR business partners, so I did that. You can't stop me. I'm going to do it. Thank you, and good night.